So good evening, everyone. My name is Manish Kumar, and I promise to keep my remarks short, but it is just a tremendous honor to have an opportunity to close out today's fantastic program. So I work at the San Francisco office of the Antitrust Division. We are your friendly local antitrust agency. We're just up the road. If anyone should find themselves in the middle of a price-fixing conspiracy, we have a very generous self-reporting program. I'm happy to give you my business card. And unlike the FTC, you can't like us on Facebook, but you can tweet at us. So, today's discussion reminded me of the idea that what's past is prologue. And a couple of times we've talked about the Microsoft case. And in fact, Professor Melamed was too humble to say that he actually worked on and supervised that case. And in that case, more than 2 decades ago, the department, including a team of attorneys consisting of attorneys from my office, filed a lawsuit alleging that Microsoft had illegally maintained its monopoly position in the personal computing operating system market by, among other things, limiting the ability for consumers to use alternatives such as Netscape. And we heard a little bit about that this morning. And I thought it was interesting to note the government's proposed findings of fact in that case. So what the government filed with the district court in connection with that enforcement action contained the following description of Microsoft's anti-competitive conduct. The government alleged that Microsoft's response to the browser threat was to embrace, extend, and extinguish. In other words, Microsoft planned to embrace existing internet standards, extend them in incompatible ways, and thereby extinguish competitors. And I wanted to mention this because I thought it did have some interesting parallels to some of the discussions that we had today about data portability and market adjacency and kill zones. And I think in many respects it shows how the incumbency challenge, the difficulty of competing with established players who have either more information or better positioning in a market, how that really has been a perennial issue from the perspective of antitrust enforcement. And I think minds may differ on this, but I happen to believe that the government's successful case against Microsoft, somewhat ironically, may well have paved the way and made room for some of the market-leading platforms that were the subject of our conversations today. And also from my perspective, I think that the Microsoft case proves that antitrust doctrine can be flexible, it can be adaptable, even in the context of new technology. And my office and the rest of my colleagues at the department, we'll continue to enforce the antitrust laws as diligently and as conscientiously as we can, even if that ends up involving the next breakthrough technology from Silicon Valley. And I think we will certainly be mindful of what was sort of a refrain today about unintended consequences in the course of that. So, reflecting on what we accomplished today, I think it was a really fascinating and unique conversation. It was a dialogue involving, members of academia, the private sector, and then government. And I think really this dialogue has been incredibly informative for us. I know I have learned a great deal, and my colleagues sitting at the tables over to the right of the room have also learned a great deal from this really fascinating discussion. And so we'll be taking what we've learned from this today back with us. And I know that it's going to inform us and guide us in our enforcement actions. But that learning by the department is not limited just to today. I wanted you to know that there is a public comment period during which anyone can provide additional feedback and thoughts about the topics that we discussed today. And in order to do that, if you go to I'm sure this is a very tech-savvy group, if you just go to the conference website, there's instructions about how you can submit that feedback, and we look forward to receiving that, and we will be looking at that very carefully. So on behalf of the organizers of the workshop, the Rock Center for Corporate Governance, the Stanford GSB, and the department, I really wanted to thank all of our distinguished panelists for your fascinating commentary today on these important issues. And I also wanted to thank the audience members for the excellent input that you had and the excellent questions. So thank you to everyone, and I hope all of you have a great evening.